Hey, this is Scott Finlay with GPTA, and this is some information I picked up in 20 years as an educator and helping kids to do well on their SATs and College Board exams, and it can work for the plumbing exam as well. This cartoon from the far side is pretty accurate as far as how your brain works to retain information that you've learned throughout the day. It's limited. And so, in the map of the brain right here in orange, we have the frontal lobe. And this is where the short term memories are stored in your brain as you go through the day. It's limited and it's similar to a computer's ready access memory, which only can contain a certain amount of information before it has to be dumped into the computer's hard drive. And our brain's hard drive is the cerebellum, this yellow one down here on the bottom near the brainstem. And that takes place throughout the day. Most of the memories are recorded in the frontal lobes. It's also a pathway is started in the cerebellum, but most of your long-term memory retention takes place when you're asleep at night. And there's a thing called the hippocampus in the middle of the brain, and it'll write information that's stored in the frontal lobes to the cerebellum. And so, in that respect, the hippocampus is kind of like the central processing unit of a computer. Now, when you go to sleep at night, there's four phases of sleep, but there's two ones that we really care about. The first is delta sleep. Now, you know you're in delta sleep when somebody wakes you up and you are so far gone, you're just out of it, and you got to sit there with a cup of coffee in your hand and watch the news or whatever it is you do in the morning for a half hour to 45 minutes before you can do anything moderately intelligent. This doesn't happen on a regular basis. You usually don't come out of delta sleep unless a fire alarm goes off or somebody wakes you up or something like that on purpose. But essentially what happens is all that short-term memory we talked about a minute ago that goes into the frontal lobe, that's kind of stuck there during the day. And then you go into that delta sleep. And what the hippocampus does is it takes all this information that you see here before sleep, and it's going to throw a bunch of it away. And then it's going to reorganize a bunch of it. And it's deciding what's important and what's not important. Okay. The other part of sleep is REM sleep, or rapid eye movement, what we call dream sleep. And if you ever seen your dog sit there and run in motion while it's sleeping, or kind of throw out some muffled barks and so forth like that, if you got up close, you could see their eyes kind of fluttering. And that's what that REM, or rapid eye movement, is. Now, this is believed by a lot of scientists that study this stuff, the time when the short-term memories, once they've gone ahead and been decided what's important, what's not important, it's actually being written down into the cerebellum. And this is what becomes our long-term memories. And this is important because these long-term memories are the type of ones that we need to store, retain, and recall information like we'll find on the plumbing exam. At the cellular level, we essentially have neurons, which are these, spider web looking things right here, and they're just bundles of cells. And in between them, we have synapses, and little electrical charges want to jump between these neurons across a synapses. Now, if you're we've all heard repetition is the key to learning. And what physically is actually happening in your brain when you're going over something again and again and again is you might have one little pathway between these synapses start to, be connected. And as you do it again and again and again, you'll notice down here in this other graphic, you get a lot more of these pathways that are connected. Now, the reason why this is important is because this is happening on a cellular level, nutrition is important. This is proteins, RNA, ribonucleic acid, all this stuff you don't need to know. But essentially, we're building cells inside our brain, and that is actual physical memory. So good nutrition helps with that. You see the Gatorade commercials, you need electrolytes. If you want electricity to jump across a pathway, and it's a water pathway, which is what our blood is, you need those electrolytes to be able to let that electricity pass. You need good nutrition. And the big one, and the reason why really want to stop on this one is some of you guys are going to be tempted to come to class. You're getting your brain crammed full of information for 8 hours. And the first thing you're going to want to do is go drink a couple beers and just forget about everything and go to sleep. Do not do that. Okay. Alcohol is one of the primary things that's going to inhibit the creation of these synapses, these neural pathways. And so if you go and you drink alcohol, everything that you work so hard to try to learn that day is most likely not going to be written into your long-term memory. Okay. So how can we use this to help us study? First, you want to limit your study sessions to 30 to 40 minutes. Hey, look, a lot of us are plumbers. We didn't get into this career because we liked book learning. I want to go so far as to say some of y'all got ADD, but you definitely might not even be able to make it to 30 to 40 minutes. You might be able only to focus and study for 15 to 20 minutes for your brain just starts jumping off the rails. So whatever works for you is fine. 3 to 6 sessions a day. If you can only do 15 to 20 minutes a session, is fine. If you can do 30 to 40 minutes, that would be better. You want to limit your distractions. Your brain doesn't like to multitask. And the more you make your brain multitask, the more you're essentially cramming useless information into that limited frontal lobe. And you don't want to do that. You want to just be dumping stuff into that frontal lobe that has to do with this plumbing test. And then another one too, if you are taking these 30 to 40 minute sessions, exercise is another thing that helps with studying and learning. So if for no other reason, just get up and go for a walk around the house. Maybe you want to go walk down the street and then come back and pop into another study session. What I'm trying to tell you here is don't think you can sit down and study for 2 or 3 or 6 hours straight and you're going to help yourself. It's actually you're wasting a lot of energy and not getting a whole lot done. The hippocampus likes different and it will discard boring. So as it's deciding what's going to stay in your long-term memory at night during that delta sleep, weird things are going to stick in your long-term memory. I mean, y'all know this, that you got some weird memories that stick in your head and you can't remember rote, boring stuff. So study weird. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to know that 200,000 BTUs, 210 degrees, and 120 gallons is the limit between a water heater and a boiler. So if you can set that to your favorite, country music or hip hop song, whatever you like, yeah, that sounds weird, but that stuff really works. Emotions are remembered, and this is why humor and telling jokes and hey, as y'all are going through this stuff, you're going to remember funny story. Don't tell funny stories for the sake of telling funny stories. But in between breaks, if you're going out to get a cigarette or you're getting a cup of coffee and you remember a funny story that relates directly to one of these questions, share it with your friends and people sitting next to you because humor absolutely works. Story works. Story gives context. This is why Ron's teaching method works so well because he's got a plethora of stories from his plumbing career, and all that stuff gives you context. And that context is what is going to encourage memory. Use all the learning modalities. Some people are sight learners. Some people can close their eyes and just listen to stuff and they can learn stuff. Most of us need to do many of these things. So seeing something, hearing something, saying it out loud, and most importantly, physical manipulation. This one's really important, especially for us who work with our hands. For all the years I coached football, it never ceased to amaze me. Guys that were dumb as a box of hammers in a classroom, we take them out and put them between white chalk on a field. All of a sudden, they become a genius, can remember 60, 70 plays where everybody's going on every play. Why is that? It's because you're teaching them through physical manipulation. So anything you can do to physically manipulate the information is going to be beneficial. Highlighting is a good example of this. And I have a picture up here of a book that's highlighted in pink highlighter. That is not the way to highlight. If you're, listening to Ron and you're going through and you're wanting to highlight information that he's pointing out and he's telling you that that's important, stick to the nouns, stick to the verbs. The is not a word that you need to remember. Is not a word that you need to remember. You need to remember, 200,000 BTUs, 210 degrees, 120 gallons, everything else that came in that sentence. Don't highlight it. On topic doodling is good. Don't be that weirdo that's sitting there writing Dungeons and Dragons drawings and so forth like that kid back in middle school. But I don't care how bad your drawing is, anything you can draw, plumbing tools, schematics, just copying the stuff that you see on the screen and drawing, that will very much help your ability to remember things. Flashcards are still the best. Okay. 3x5 note cards, questions on the front, answer on the back. You should have the formal on the front because the test is going to be taken in the formal language that you see on Ron's sample test that he gives you and in the information he's giving you in the packet. But you want to, on the back in your answer, you want to go ahead and write how you talk. So if you're from the streets or you're from out in rural Georgia and you got a whole host of words that somebody from suburbia wouldn't know, and that's how you talk on a day-to-day basis, by God, you use that language. Okay. Hey, if you cuss a lot, okay, write that stuff out just like you would. You learn in the language of your brain. And so you want to take the formal and put it to the informal, the answer, so that you'll basically be able, your brain will accept it easier. Okay. Make your flashcards from the wrong pre and post test questions. So if you take 120 test question overnight, come back the next day and you get 32 questions wrong, you're going to highlight those as Ron's going over the test packet. Those are the ones you make into flashcards. Study roughly 10 of those at a time. Take the ones out of the stack that you get right and keep going over the ones you keep getting wrong. Now, if you get a handful of these, you've gone over 3 or 4 wrong, you're like, man, I just can't get this one right. That goes in a special pile. You might want to study those right before you go to sleep because remember, we are encoding this information. A lot of this is taking place before you go to sleep. So the last thing that you think of before you go to sleep is very important. Don't study all day long and then watch, your favorite TV show for an hour before you go to sleep. Watch your favorite study, watch your favorite TV hour, and then perhaps break out those really hard questions in the flashcards and go over those right before you go to sleep. And then just finally, circadian rhythms. This is the wake-sleep cycle, and people have an optimum time for learning and concentration. It's believed by deep thinkers and engineers, you get about half hour to 45 minutes a day where you can really solve your most complex problems. Exposure to natural light is a factor. This doesn't usually happen early in the morning is your best, and it's not usually late at night. Getting out in the sunlight stimulates the movement to your best learning and concentration period. For most people, that happens sometimes between mid-morning and afternoon. It's different for everybody. Bring a set of those 10 cards with you. Go over them real quick on your lunch break, or perhaps when you're riding in the passenger seat with a friend of yours is driving the plumbing truck. Sit there and go over that middle of the day. That's going to probably be some of your best learning and studying and memorizing. So while studying prior to sleep isn't the best time for concentration, once again, it's a good time to hit those things that are really hard. And then finally, get good sleep the night before the test. Don't stay up all night studying and go in tired. You want to have 7 to 8 hours of really good rest. And make sure your testing matches your learning. So if you're doing a lot of your studying at a particular time of day, try to set your test time for that time of day. If you're eating a particular type of foods while you're learning, eat those foods that when you go in for that test. If you're sitting there with a coffee or a Gatorade or whatever it is you like to study, you go ahead and make sure you're having that same thing before you sit down to take that test, because that's going to facilitate the recall out of your brain, all those things that you stuffed into it. All right, I hope this helps, and good luck on your test.